Good morning Year 5 and welcome to your tutorial for Blue and Green Group on Monday the 25th of January. Today, as you can see from our learning objective, we are creating complex sentences. So within our writing, from the beginning of the year, we have looked quite a lot at simple sentences, our subject, verb, object, someone doing something, and our compound sentences, which is when we joined two clauses together to make a sentence with additional information. So today we are going to be looking at our third sentence type, and our third sentence type is complex sentences. But before we get there, a little bit of a recap. So on the screen I have some word classes, some things to do with grammar, and on the right hand side in black they're labels. So I'd just like you to pause now and see if you can match them up with their correct label. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to do that by now, and we will have a little look at them together. So dog is of course a noun, it is a thing. Ran is a verb because it is a doing word, it is something that you are doing. The cold water, so I've now got compound sentence, simple sentence or phrase. Now the cold water, it isn't doing anything, there's no verb within there, so I know it is a phrase. Here I've got my noun water and my adjective cold to describe it, and the, which is my determiner. The man walked. Now, is this a compound sentence or a simple sentence? Well, what do I have? I have a determiner, I have a noun, and I have a verb. So I've got a subject and a verb, which would make this a simple sentence. Now remember, sometimes you can have a preposition on there, which works as an object. So the man walked on the path to the park. This doesn't change the fact that it would still be a simple sentence. Here we've got the man walked, yet he stayed still. This yet is really important. That's one of our coordinating conjunctions. So here we have a clause, the man walked. Here we have he stayed still, which is a clause because it's the subject, he, verb, stayed. And in the middle we have yet, our coordinating conjunction, meaning this is a compound sentence. So phrases and clauses and the difference are really important. You cannot join phrases together to make sentences. There has to be a verb in there in order for the sentence to be a sentence and for it to make sense. So again, I'd like you just to pause the clip now and have a little think. Are these, on the left hand side, phrases, so just a collection of words without a verb, or are they clauses? Hopefully you've managed to do that by now. So Lola sang beautifully will of course be a clause, because sang is a verb. And abandoned ship, that is just descriptive, there's no verb in there, so that should be a phrase. The white flower, again, it's not doing anything, there's no verb within there, so it is just a phrase. But again, notice how they're descriptive, they're telling me about the flower and about the ship. The boys kicked the football. Oh, kick's quite important here. That is going to be a clause because there is a verb within it. Opposite the park is just going to be a phrase, more specifically a prepositional phrase. These are noun phrases, aren't they? Because of flower and ship. Opposite the park, opposite is a preposition, it tells me where something's happening. And the wind howled fiercely, and howled is of course a verb, meaning this is a clause. So our final sentence type is a complex sentence. As we've just looked at and reminded ourselves, compound sentences join two main clauses. A complex sentence combines a main clause and a subordinate clause. And there's a lot of labels in there, and sometimes grammar can get a little bit confusing. So what does that actually mean? Well, a subordinate clause gives extra information about the main clause. It can come before or after, but it doesn't always make sense on its own. Sometimes it will, but sometimes it doesn't. What's very important is the idea that the main clause is the part of the sentence that you are actually talking about, the information your reader needs to know, for example. And then the subordinate clause is less important but gives more detail, which is really important for this piece of writing that we're moving on to, because your reader needs as much detail as possible in order to be able to write their balanced argument. So, Jane read a book because she enjoys it. The main clause is Jane read a book. Jane, the subject, is reading, the verb. It makes sense on its own, and the purpose of this sentence is to tell you that Jane is reading a book. Because she enjoys it is extra information. She doesn't I don't need to know that she enjoyed it, but it gives me a clearer indication perhaps about Jane as a person, as the reader. She enjoys it doesn't necessarily make sense on its own. This bit needed this bit in order for it to make sense. So, again, let's have a look at that element of subordinate clause. So that remember, subordinate means less important, and it's the part that might not necessarily make sense. So again, I'd like you just to pause the clip and have a guess as to whether each of these underlined sections are a main clause, the important thing you want to know, or the subordinate clause, the less important information. Okay, let's go through some answers. So, the first one is a subordinate clause. What is the most important part of this sentence? The fact that Emery arrived, or that it was after the school bell? Well, as a reader, you're going to need to know that Emery arrived. So after the school bell rung gives me extra detail, so therefore that is my subordinate clause. And after the school bell rung doesn't make sense as a sentence on its own. Next, although I was terrified, I crept up the creaking staircase will be subordinate again. The main part of this story or this sentence might be I crept up the creaking staircase. That is what you are doing. Although you were terrified is just telling your reader additional information about your state of mind at the time. This one, it was raining so we cancelled our picnic. It's going to be our main clause. What actually happened? Well, the picnic was cancelled. That is our main piece of information from that sentence. Despite it being -2 outside, Frank still didn't bring his jumper to school. Will be subordinate, because despite it being -2, that is just additional information about the day, how cold it was. The main piece of information that we're trying to convey there is that Frank didn't bring his jumper to school. On Fridays we normally go swimming, but today I forgot my kit. Should be a main clause. The important thing here is today I forgot my kit. That is what you would be telling your teacher. The additional information is that we normally go on Fridays. And the fox slinked through the dense undergrowth is going to be our main clause, because the pouncing on the unsuspecting mouse is just additional information. The main task he's doing is going through the undergrowth. So in order to write our complex sentences, we need to have subordinating conjunctions. So we remember our coordinating conjunctions with fanboys, but we now have a new set of conjunctions called subordinating conjunctions, and there are some examples on the slide in front of you. So how do we use them? Well, you come up with your clause. Here I've got many people believe the lunar landings were fake. Normally, for a lot of us, that would be our sentence. But if we're pushing ourselves to add that extra information and extra detail, we could then pick one of these conjunctions to put in and then to finish our sentence. So, many people believe the lunar landings were fake because there is a lot of evidence to suggest this. So what have I got here? Forget my underlining tool. I've got my main clause, the lunar landings were fake. I've got my conjunction, because, and I have got my subordinating clause, there is a lot of evidence to suggest this. So 3 sections, main clause, conjunction, subordinate clause, but look at how it takes your writing from sentence, 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 sentence to sentence with detail, sentence with detail. Then you might put a short sentence in. So some argue photos show no stars in the sky. I might use while others, and then I might use some parentheses, including scientists have pictures which show the lunar module's tracks. So you can see this is really helping me create that contrast, that I'm giving both sides of the argument. So some argue photos show no stars in the sky, while others, including scientists, have pictures which show the lunar module's tracks. And then I might add in there an adverbial to give extra detail. Tracks on the moon, my adverbial of place.